Hello, everybody. Welcome to my presentation about Common Data Environment, the process. I'll be here with you virtually. I'm Mostafa Elashmawy, Senior BIM Manager and GIS Manager for WSP Middle East. I have a Master in Global BIM Management, certified in Information Management from several institutions, working with WSP at some of the Middle East largest projects. I'll be happy to be with you through this presentation, talking about the evolution of the common data environment through the years. What's the difference between the common data environment in the British standards BS 1192 and ISO 19650, how to set up the common data environment process, and what are the main aspects to consider during this process. So to start, I would like to talk about what is a common data environment. So usually we think of a common data environment as a platform that's available for everybody to collaborate through, and that's it. However, the common data environment is much larger than this. We all agree or understand that the common data environment is the agreed sort of truth within a project, but it's not only a technical solution or a platform, it's also a process and a workflow of the flow of information during a project. So this process should be defined to explain how the information containers or the documents through the project will be treated, what are these the states of these containers, what's the metadata, classification, revision codes, and so. However, also we would need to define the technical solutions that will host this common data environment, which can be one platform or a mix of several platforms. This technical solution usually can be an electronic data management system, an EDMS, or even an offline hard disk, or sometimes it's a local network for a specific company. So it can be any of these. Through the years, the concept of the common data environment has changed and has been documented in several publications. For example, BS 1192, PAS 1192, Part 2, and ISO 19650, Part 1 and 2. Starting by BS 1192, this document has defined the content of the common data environment and the process of having a common data environment. It was issued in 2007, and then the process was refined in 2015. This standard defined um, how to control the revisions. It defines the suitability codes of the documents and the flow of information between the folders and the gates between these folders. It also defines the four famous containers of information, or the four famous phases of information: work in progress, shared, published, and archived. PAS 1192 Part 2, that was issued in 2013, then expanded the concept of common data environment, and it covered both the CAPEX, which is the delivery phase of the project, and the OPEX, the operation phase of the project. So this standard detailed um, more areas of collaboration. It specified the gates between each phase and specified what checks need to be done for the information to go from work in progress to shared, and what to be done before when going from shared to published. It has this additional part for the OPEX stage. It introduced also client shared area. So there was huge development in the PAS 1192. And then when the international standards ISO 19650 parts 1 and 2 was issued in 2018, these standards tended to simplify a bit the process, but also provided a guideline for each project and information manager to further develop the customized common data environment to fit their project. So the standards ISO 19650 defined the work in progress, shared and published, and they called it states of information, and also defined the archive. However, it provided the process that we will describe in this presentation. Why we should have this process and why we should have a common data environment. Usually, we need a common data environment to specify the responsibilities through the project, who is responsible for which information. So when you share documents or when you use documents on common data environment, the document is originated by some entity and then shared with other entities and then approved and then shared with other entities. However, through this workflow, it's always clear who is the originator of the document, who has authority to edit it. So no matter the length of this process, we can always identify who is responsible for the information. And also, having a common data environment reduce the time and cost for production of coordinated information, because it allows us to have all various kinds of information in one place. So if I'm a structural designer, I can have access to the architectural design, maybe design in the same place. I can link this information, so it makes the coordination process smoother. Also, it provides a full audit trail of information where you can know the stages where this document has passed through, so you can understand the whole history of a document. Who should set this process? As per ISO 19650, the appointing party, the employer, the client should establish this process. They need to implement the common data environment, configure it, support it through the whole project. And to do so, the appointing party can use their own individuals from the team of the appointing party, or they can dedicate or hire a specific appointed party to do this job. They can have a third party to be responsible for implementing this process, or they can also choose one of their existing appointed party to take this responsibility. So mainly it's the responsibility of the employer. However, he can delegate it to other entities to be responsible for this process. When this process should be done, it's always recommended that this is done at the earliest stage of the project. So ISO 19650 name this stage the earliest stage of a project as assessment and need stage. In this stage, the appointing party should define all the information requirements and standards, methods, procedures. So in this stage, also they need to define the common data environment and develop the process. And this is always recommended to be done before any invitation to tender, before having other consultants and contractors producing information. Because imagine the mess that will happen if you delayed in setting this process, and now you will have hundreds of documents that need to be restructured and added to the common data environment. Where this process should be defined, it need to be defined in as part of the project information protocol, and it's always recommended to have a separate document for the common data environment, which can be the common data environment manual. And in this manual, the process should be identified, the platform that will be used as a common data environment should be introduced and detailed, and all the steps of the process should be clearly identified, including the approval processes and the types of information, naming conventions, and so. Also, the common data environment, where will it be hosted? Can be hosted, as I mentioned earlier, on a single platform, which is, from my point of view, is the best solution to have one single central common data environment. However, sometimes it happens that you have several platforms that act as a common data environment, and this can happen for several reasons. So for example, because of the types of information, sometimes you may need a specific common data environment for the usual drawings and models, but you would need also separate common data environment for dealing with contracts, for example. The states of information would also play an important part here, where some clients would prefer that the work in progress is done separately, where consultants and contractors can have their own common data environment for their work in progress, because in the work in progress maybe the information can be not mature enough to be shared through the official common data environment. We have such cases, and it's acceptable as long as these common data environments are all aligned, and that's the role of the information manager, that need to ensure that if several platforms are used, they are all aligned using this process. Also, one more reason that would be important here is sensitivity or confidentiality of information. So confidential information can be stored on an offline hard drive, for example. So the process itself, from my point of view, can be split into 5 steps or 5 aspects. So the first aspect is information states. As mentioned earlier, ISO 19650 specified 3 main states of information: work in progress, shared, and published. And for each state, it need to be clearly defined what information should be considered as shared, what can be considered as published, when we can publish information, what approvals need to be done before publishing information, and so. Um, an additional state is the archive state, where any documents that move between any of these states need to be archived, and this need to be a feature implemented in the technical solution or the platform that will be used. So whenever anything is shared or published, it need to be archived, and a journal of this information container should include all the transactions, or the points where this information moved from this organization to another organization. Current information can exist in more than one state. This happens, for example, when a designer has finished working on a specific stage and shared it with other entities for coordination, but on the same time, they would be working on another revision of the work in progress based on new information that they have received. So on the common data environment, there will be 2 versions of the document. So using the revision codes and the status codes, we need to be able to identify the actual state of this file. So each state also can have sub-states. So for example, if you have several disciplines within your scope, so you may want to have dedicated work in progress for structural engineers, dedicated work in progress for electrical architecture, and so on. Also, information may have a long process of approval that pass by several gates of approval. So the shared information can the shared folder or the shared state can be expanded into several shared states based on the process of approval. So if your contractor, for example, will need to get approval from the designer before issuing this to the client, this need to be also identified as different states. The second important aspect in the process is the naming convention. The naming convention should identify the method of naming files. Each information container should have a specific or a unique ID to explain the content of the document. The standards propose methods of naming files, and usually it consists of fields that and each field has a specific codes that need to be selected from list of codes, and then there is delimiters between them. This example that you can see here on the screen is taken from UK National Annex of ISO 19650 Part 2, and in their example they use as a unique identifier. So any file should have a first field showing the project, then the originator. Sometimes these are maybe three digits, three numbers and letters, codes that represent the originator. Then functional breakdown. This may refer to a design system. For example, if you are designing a bridge, there may be a functional breakdown code refers to the abutments, another for the piers, and so spatial breakdown. This refers to usually the location or the level zones, for example, that's included in this document. Also, the form of the document. What type of document is this? Is it a drawing? Is it a model? Is it a report? And so on. The discipline, architectural structure, and so, and then a unique number, and this number is recommended always to be unique, no matter the other information varies. Then the third aspect is the metadata, and from a language point of view, the metadata is a set of data that describes other data. So we need to set what are the metadata that need to be defined for each file. In a project, the unique ID of a file can be a metadata. Also, the revision codes can be a metadata, the status codes, the classification. Every field that we mentioned in the unique code can be a metadata to the file. So in the common data environment, you can search for all the files that are, let's say, in project number one, or all the files that's originated by a specific organization. So this metadata help the search and filtering and identifying the group of information that this file belongs to. uh, any common data environment that would be used in a project need to be able to assign this metadata. And if for any reason you want to download a file and take it away from your common data environment, it's always recommended that you take the name of the file, the unique identifier, and the revision code and status code, just to keep aware of the actual codes of this file. The next aspect that you need to define in your process is the revision codes. And revision codes need to be used during all the states of the file. So it need to be used to control the revision during work in progress, shared information, published information. And this example that you can see here is taken from UK BIM framework guidelines based on ISO 19650 UK National Annex, and it proposes three components to identify the revision code of any file. The first part is usually a letter that define the formality of this file. For example, whether it's a contractual document or non-contractual. The second number usually refer to the revision after sharing the document. So when you share a document with another entity, it should have this revision. And when this document is returned to you as approved or rejected, you would need to add use the next number for this revision. Then the third component usually refer to the work in progress revision. So if you are working within your team still, but you finished a revision, and then without sharing the document, you are adding new updates to this document, it's always recommended to use a next revision. And sometimes even after sharing the document, you would make some edits in the work in progress. So that's where you will use this revision. The status codes is a way to define the suitability of the file. So is this file shared for information? Is it shared for review? Is it shared for coordination? Is it shared maybe for quantity takeoff? And the table that you see here in this screen is taken from UK National Annex, and it proposes these specific codes. For example, S0 for work in progress, and then for the shared information, whenever it's not published yet or not considered as contractual, you have a variety of codes based on the suitability of this file. And then once it's published, it's then moved to the A codes, and based also on the approval or the comments that you may receive on the document, you may go to another level of codes. So it's important that you define these status codes. And if your country don't have such guidance, you may need to develop these status codes for your specific project. And this example is a very helpful guide that you can use. To summarize, um, this process is the responsibility of the appointing party, or whoever he would appoint to do this process, to implement it and configure it. And this need to be done as early as possible. And to do so, you would need to go through these 5 questions. Why you would do this, who will be responsible for it, when it need to be done, and where will be it defined in the information protocol, what's the technical solution. And it's always important to have a CDE manual that define all what's mentioned here. And then you would be responsible to define the information states, naming convention, metadata, revision codes, status codes, and never rely on the, let's say, the international guidance as the only reference. You need to develop the project specific documents that may refer to the international standards. That's very good approach. Use these standards, but to develop your project specific process that apply to the project and that's communicated through all the stakeholders in the project to have this common data environment working in a proper way. The last thing that I want to mention that most of the information shared here was based on my understanding to ISO 19650 and the UK National Annex and UK BIM Framework Guidelines. I recommend all of you to go and read it properly before implementing the common data environment in your project. So thank you. That was the presentation, and I'll be happy to receive any questions that you may have. Thank you.